All right, it is 9 o'clock, so we're going to jump right on in. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our June webinar. My name is Megan Levina, and joining us today is Emily Zimmon, who will be presenting on Legacy in Motion from Quiet Moments to Big Impacts. Emily Zimmon helps groups strengthen connection, improve engagement, and create healthier, more inclusive environments. Her sessions blend insights, compassion, and practical tools to address real-world challenges, leaving audiences inspired, reflective, and ready to take action. And with that, I'm going to hand it right over to you, Emily. Thanks for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. I am so excited to be here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Legacy in Motion, from quiet moments to big impact. Now, for a lot of us, when we hear the word legacy, we often think about something that happens at the end of the career, right? The time that we're looking at retiring, our accomplishments, our milestones, the awards we've won, or any major achievements. But the reality is kind of this: legacy is built every single day. It's built in conversations, it's built through decisions, it's built in how we respond when things are going well and when they're not. And so, as leaders, we actually leave an impact on the people around us, whether we intend to, every single day through our actions, our consistency, and the way we show up for others. We're constantly shaping how people experience us and how they experience themselves. So, today, we're going to explore what that looks like in practice. We'll talk about the small moments that often have the greatest impact, how communication shapes trust and ownership, and I'll be providing you all with some simple tools that can help us become more intentional about the legacy that we're creating every day. Because leadership isn't just about getting results, it's about the impact we leave behind and the people we lead. So I do have the chat pulled open. I am going to be asking people to participate just a few times throughout this hour that we're going to spend together. So be prepared. And I'm going to kick us off right now with talking about some leadership characteristics. Before we dive into communication, before we dive into trust, ownership, or any of the tools that we're going to cover today, I'd like to start with a little reflection. I'd like each of you to think about the least effective leader you've ever worked for. Or even if you haven't worked for them, like someone that you've worked alongside. You probably had someone come to mind pretty quickly. Don't put any names in the chat. Just think about that person for a moment. What was it that made them difficult to work with? What characteristics come to mind? Drop one or two in the chat if you have something that immediately comes up. The least effective leader. Didn't mean they were a bad person. Maybe they led or ruled by fear, an inability to communicate, micromanaging. Thank you, those of you putting things in the chat. I know there's a lot of us in this room. Who's got some other characteristics that came straight to mind? Controller, inconsistency. Yeah, giving it a few more seconds for anyone else who wants to join. I know, again, always seem to have a hidden agenda, reactive to honest opinions that are opposite of theirs. Only their opinion mattered. Threat by intimidation, paranoid. We all have these. Thank you so much for those of you who have put some in. Some of the common responses that I have heard throughout my time leading this training and throughout my career, and those I've experienced myself, include being dismissive, inconsistent, controlling, reactive, and detached. Now, we talked about those that immediately came to mind when I said not the best leader or not the greatest. Let's go the other direction. Think about one of the best leaders you've ever worked for. Or maybe you work for them right now. Again, no names in the chat. We can give them kudos on our own time by sending a text or email after this training. But someone who had a positive impact on you, someone you respected, maybe someone who helped you grow. What characteristics come to mind when you think about those individuals? Again, drop them in the chat. I've got engaged, authentic, empowering, mentoring, grateful, thankful, sympathetic, great listener. I love, by the way, that all of you are dropping So many more examples of great leaders in this chat, so much quicker than you did with the bad leaders. This is spectacular. This tells me we've got a lot of really great people out here. Trusted, humble, determined, actually cared, saw the value someone had, encouraging, listened for understanding. These are amazing, trustworthy, provided support to be our best selves. Here are some of the common responses that I hear: respectful, trusting, authentic, clear, and empathetic. So thank you again to each and every single one of you who dropped something into the chat. I think for most of us, we can identify with these characteristics almost immediately. Years later, again, we are still remember the leaders and how they made us feel. But secondly, what I want to say and what's interesting is that many of these characteristics aren't about technical expertise or intelligence. They're about experience. They're about trust, the way people experience that leader. And I want to acknowledge this too. None of us are on just one side of this list. We all want to be but every leader has good days. Every leader has bad days, right? We all find ourselves on some days maybe controlling something a little more than we want to. Maybe we're trusting 1 second, but then someone loses that trust and we become more dismissive. Maybe we are empathetic and then we're having a bad day ourselves and we're kind of detached from what's happening because we have those good days and those difficult days. But we want people to follow moments where they fall short and recognize where we are, because this isn't about perfection. Being a leader, in fact, is never going to be about perfection. If that's what we're striving for, we are almost always going to fall short because we are human, and that is okay. What's important is that we're aware of who we are and where we want to be. Because if we want to be intentional about the legacy we leave, we have to understand the impact we're already having on the people around us. And today we're here, Kirkwood Corporate Training, right? We are talking specifically about our professional careers, but in reality, this is true of who we are with our friends, with our family, with people we meet on the street, with the person checking us out at the grocery store. These are all things that we can think about, and the legacy we leave with people we maybe won't even know their name. Because people will forget about what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou. I think this quote resonates with so many people because we've all experienced it. Most of us can't remember every conversation we've had with a supervisor, a manager, a colleague, or a mentor. And I don't know about you guys, I am actually not that great at remembering people's names. And so sometimes I don't remember the name. I can't remember the piece of advice they gave me, and I can't remember every decision they made, but I often remember exactly how they made me feel. Because we remember whether we felt respected, trusted, valued, whether we felt heard or capable or believed in. If I go back to the characteristics that we just talked about, and when we think about the positive characteristics that showed up in the chat, what's interesting is that those aren't just leadership traits, but they're experiences. A lot of people put in the chat how they felt when they were talking to their leader that they remembered positively and negatively, right? It was the respectful leader who made us, well, feel respected, the empathetic leader who made us feel understood, the trusting leader who makes us feel capable, the clear leader who makes us feel confident, and the authentic leader who makes us feel safe to be ourselves, share our thoughts, our ideas, our opinions, give us the space to step up, to move forward in our own careers and the goals that we have. Because these leadership characteristics don't exist in isolation. We experience them every single day. And the primary way we do that is through interactions and our communication and the way we do that with others. We don't wake up in the morning and decide whether I'm going to go in and work with someone who is respectful, empathetic, trusting, authentic. Those decisions happen over time. Those memories happen over time through hundreds of small interactions, meetings, one on one conversations, quick hallway chats, emails, water cooler conversations, and through the way leaders respond when things are going well and when they're not. So, in other words, leadership isn't just something we believe, it's something other people experience. And one of the first places they experience it is how we begin a conversation. So, as I'm talking about this, I initially had us start by reflecting on those that we know, supervisors that we either saw in action or got to experience directly ourselves in the good and the bad. And now I'm going to shift a little bit to us thinking more about ourselves and how we can be those leaders, whether in the workplace or at home with family, friends, or in the community. So, because we just talked about the leaders we admire and the leaders we struggle under and those characteristics, those things that we discussed, respect, trust, empathy, clarity, integrity, the characteristics that were put in the chat, they don't live in mission statements, they show up in moments. And one of the most important moments is how a conversation begins. Because the way a conversation starts quietly sets the tone for everything that follows. Before someone remembers what you said, they remember how you make them feel, and they remember how that started with a conversation. Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone at work. You could probably tell within the first 10 seconds whether it felt collaborative or directive. On a scale of 1 to 10, please drop it in the chat. How do these conversation starters make you feel? 1 being not good, anxious, reactive. 10 being spectacular, I'm here for this, I got it. 1 to 10, how do those make you feel? We need to talk. Awful for me, absolutely awful, immediate anxiety. What's going on here? I want to make sure we're aligned. Seeing lots of 1s, some 4s, a couple 3s. Yeah, these don't make me feel good. I immediately have a wall up the second this happens, right? I am looking at conversation starters that are probably going to result in me as the employee, as the person who's getting this directed at them, to put up some barriers and go into my fight and flight mode, right? I'm either going to want to run away from this conversation or I am prepared to battle to say, no, 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 this is a good thing. I'm doing a good thing. I know we need to talk. Please don't fire me. Please don't tell me I'm suspended. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know about you guys. It's the whole joke of you go to an airport and they tell you all the things you can't have. And you're all of a sudden like, did I accidentally pack some type of chemical that I don't even own? But the fear of what could come or what could happen when someone says we need to talk. Now, what about the new versions? 1 to 10, 1 being these make you feel anxious, reactive, not good. 10, you feel comfortable, you feel capable of having a conversation. You feel like these are areas that you could comfortably sit down and have a conversation with. Especially if it shows up in an email. How many of us have gotten a we need to talk email, hey, I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m., and you spend the next 24 hours worried about the topic? I'm seeing 7s, 8s, 9s. Thank you so much for putting those in the chat. These feel better, right? One of the key things is they start with a hey, hi, a hello. They don't just dive straight into here's where we're going to go. This is clearly going to be a conversation that might not go exactly the way you want it to, but you all already put in the chat you feel more comfortable. Why? Because you have someone who's recognizing you first and foremost, and then you have someone who's talking in a more collaborative way. Do you have a minute to talk about? Is giving that opportunity for you to say yes or no. I'd love to learn more. You're talking in a more collaborative way. Would love to chat to make sure we're right lined, yes, but would love to chat, right? That takes away that fear of the specific meeting. I once heard a story of a supervisor whose ability to communicate with their staff, I have since copied and love. And I wish I knew who they were to give them credit for it. But they sat down with an employee of theirs over coffee and said from the get go, "Hey, I would like to talk about your last 6 months with us at the company. Now, I know that you have some anxiety around conversations like these. So, first off, recognize the person, labeled what they might be feeling, and then said, so I would like to go through exactly what we're going to talk about in this next hour. We are going to go through your performance review, and I am going to talk about all the things that you have done really well during these past 6 months. I am also going to talk about some areas of growth. These are not criticisms. These are not bad things that you have done. These are just areas that I think you could exceed in more and areas that I would love to see you grow in. I do this with every single person I meet with when I go through their 6 month peer review. And I would like to have this conversation with you today. Are you comfortable with us going through this? And where would you like to start? And giving the power to the person to understand what your full agenda is, where they are, what's happening, and then giving them the opportunity to say if they would like to start with the things that they want, the areas of growth, right? The spaces that they can work on more, or whether they want to start with the good feedback because they know they're going to get both from the beginning is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to start a conversation as a leader, especially if you know your staff and you know that you have staff members or team members or family members or friends who have some more anxiety around these types of conversations. I have done this in friendships. I have said, hey, I want to talk about a few things because I have some questions about how our friendship is right now because I've been feeling X, Y, and Z. Is it okay if we talk about that now? Right? Giving space, giving opportunities. So, how conversations begin, how we lay that out, the opportunities we provide are incredibly important. Well, guess what? On the flip side, how conversations end is also really important. In fact, this is often more overlooked than how they start because if beginnings we set direction, endings set memory. People don't always remember every detail of the conversation, right? We had this talk earlier about the characteristics. You're not remembering specific things, but you're remembering how you felt. And when a conversation ends is most often the strongest feelings you will have, whether that's clarity, confidence, and ownership, or whether it is confusion, pressure, and dependence. When conversations end with direction, people often leave knowing what to do, but not necessarily feeling confident in how to do it. When conversations end with exploration and with clarity, people leave more grounded, more capable, and more committed. And this is where legacy shows up in a very real way. Not in big speeches, not even in performance reviews, right? Like that person who experienced that with their supervisor, those that I supervised after I learned that and started enacting that in my everyday life in nonprofits and corporate philanthropy work. It was how people felt that mattered and how they walked away with that and what they did moving forward. How we start conversations and in the final 10, 15, 20 seconds of all of our conversations is what truly makes the difference. Thank you, by the way, Kayla, for sharing the choose your own adventure approach to these types of conversations. That to me is an incredible way to put that. I love that. And that's exactly what's happening too at the end of these conversations. Notice how I flipped from let me know when it's done, I'll expect an update or figure it out, which I think we've all heard, and it doesn't sound great right now, to when would be a good time to touch base again? Can you keep me updated as this progresses? And can you put together some options and circle back? All of those are questions that puts the ball in the court of the person you are talking to. Again, coworker, staff member, family, friend, right? These are great opportunities. I always recommend to people, if you haven't read before, The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. It talks a little bit more about how to handle, responsibilities and what that looks like. So these questions that I've put in front of you actually work really well in that. I won't go into it deeper because we're talking more about communication and legacy, but every time you are putting some of that responsibility on someone else, it means it's not on your plate to have to circle back, to touch base, to put together the options for that person. And so these are really great endings in that the person you are talking to feels empowered to make the next step and to make that decision, and also takes that off of you as a manager or supervisor, allowing you to lead and give them that opportunity. Now, I could spend the rest of the time together giving us examples of dozens of things to say and not to say. We could build, honestly, like a giant list of preferred phrases and conversation starters, but leadership is far too nuanced for that. Every conversation is different, every person is different, every situation is different. So rather than giving you a script, I'd rather give you a framework that helps you think about communication differently, a framework that helps you understand why certain conversations build trust while others create resistance, a framework that honestly helps you align your communication with the legacy that you want to leave. Because the most effective leaders I've worked with don't have all the right answers memorized. They have a way of thinking about conversations. They know how to create understanding, and they know how to create ownership and how to help people move forward. So, tell mode, check mode, explore mode. Tell mode is exactly what it sounds like. Direction, we provide answers, we explain, we advise. Now, this mode is important, okay? Do not get me wrong. New employees absolutely need guidance. Safety issues require direction. Compliance issues require direction, right? These all need tell mode. The problem isn't tell mode itself, it's when tell mode becomes our default. Examples being, here's what I need you to do. Let me explain. This is how we are going to handle it. And here's the answer. Many leaders think that they've moved beyond tell mode when they've moved to check mode, which is true because now you're asking questions. But often these questions are just that. They are checking. Check mode is about gathering information, monitoring progress, and assessing status. How's it going? Did you finish that? Where are we on this? What's the update? Check mode helps us stay informed. Again, we need this just like we need tell mode. It helps us manage performance, but it often stays focused on facts and status rather than understanding. And that's really and truly why we need explore mode, because explore mode is where discovery happens. Instead of asking for information, we are seeking understanding. Instead of focusing on the task, we're focusing on the person experiencing that task. What's your thinking on this? What challenges are you running into? What feels most important right now? How are you approaching this? Explore mode doesn't assume we already know the answer. It creates space for people to think and contribute and discover solutions for themselves. Most of us became leaders because we're good at solving problems. We see an issue, we identify a solution, and we help move people forward. The challenge is that when we all become responsible for results, we can start to over rely on direction. We tell, we explain, we correct, we guide, and then we do it all over again. And again, Sometimes that's exactly what's needed, right? Absolutely. But if every conversation is driven by direction, we unintentionally rob people of the opportunity for them to think, contribute, and discover. And when we think about the leaders we admired, all the way back at the beginning of this conversation, they certainly provided direction when needed, but they also helped us arrive at answers ourselves. They asked questions that made us think, they helped us see things differently, and they treated us like capable people, not like problems to solve. These principles are at the heart of an approach I'm going to talk a little bit about today called motivational interviewing. And despite the name, it's not about motivational speeches and it's not about convincing people what you want them to do. It's about helping people uncover their own motivations, their own solutions, and their own commitment to change. In other words, it's about moving from direction to discovery through three key areas: curiosity, empathy, and ownership. Now, each of these areas we'll dive into a little bit more, and I want to talk about motivational interviewing because this is an incredible opportunity for people who want to learn more outside of this training to dive deeper into that area. These are just some that I have taken and utilized throughout my entire career that I want to share with you that I have found most impactful in my leadership journey and when I'm talking to others about their leadership journey. Because curiosity, empathy, and ownership sound great in theory, really and truly. Like, I think we all have that within ourselves, and we want that to be part of the legacy that we're leaving. The question is, what do they actually look like in practice? Fortunately, that's what I'm going to be here talking about. So we don't have to guess. And there are a few simple communication skills that help bring each of these principles to life. So curiosity starts with accepting that we may not have the whole story. One of the easiest ways to demonstrate curiosity is through open-ended questions. They invite people to think, reflect, and share more than a simple yes or no answer. Tell me more about that. It's one of my favorites, by the way. Tell me more. Tell me more. I love saying that to people. Again, friends, family, coworkers, whomever. What's your perspective? What's been most challenging? How are you thinking about this? The goal isn't to gather information. The goal here is to understand how someone is experiencing the situation. Empathy isn't agreeing with someone. That's not what empathy is about. It's about demonstrating that you understand what they're experiencing. Now, most leaders listen for facts. Empathetic leaders listen for feelings, concerns, motivations, and meaning. Reflective listening is simply putting that understanding into words. It sounds like you're frustrated. It sounds like you're excited, but a little nervous. It seems like you're feeling overwhelmed. I'm hearing you say it sounds like you're balancing a lot of competing priorities. People don't need us to solve every problem for them, but they do need to know that they have been understood. And in fact, I am reading a book right now that I also recommend to everyone called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And this is actually about negotiating. And he talks in there a lot about how these different skills, curiosity, empathy, open-ended questions, reflective listening, and our next topic all come into different ways of how we negotiate with people. So if you're in sales, HR, any area of expertise, these also work there too. And the next one is when leaders immediately provide answers, they solve today's problems. But when leaders help people discover their own answers, they build confidence for tomorrow's challenges. Evoking solutions means resisting the urge to immediately jump in with advice. Oof, how many of us are guilty of that? I had to learn as a social worker to ask, would you like solutions or would you like to talk about this? Because it's very easy for me as a person to want to give advice, but I had to have that awareness that we talked about in the beginning of the areas that might be the characteristics we're not proudest of, but we have and we own, and we know how to put those in check when needed. Because evoking solutions means resisting that urge. It means asking, what ideas do you have? What options are you considering? What do you think might work? What have you tried before? Because the goal isn't to withhold support. That's not what I'm encouraging or suggesting anyone does, but it is to help people recognize that they already have the knowledge, the experience, and the capability to contribute. And if they don't have that right then and there, they have the ability to maybe go find those answers, because the ability to research and gain that knowledge, to gain that understanding, is also incredibly important. And when we empower people to do that, we allow them to come up with the ownership for what they're experiencing. Because at the end of the day, people may forget the exact words we use, but they'll remember whether we made them feel heard, whether we helped them grow, and whether we left them more capable than we found them. Because when we think about legacy, we're not really talking about communication, we're talking about impact. Communication is simply the tool through which that impact is delivered. So, how do we communicate in a way that builds trust, ownership, and confidence? It's a great question. And it comes with the power from 1 to 10. If we want to build trust, ownership, confidence, and all of those qualities we associated with great leaders, we first have to understand the people that we are leading. And understanding isn't something that happens by accident. There are tools that help us get there. People often struggle to explain how they're feeling, and the power of 1 to 10 creates that shortcut. If we transition to asking people on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you feeling right now about the next steps? On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel for this change? How manageable does your workload feel? How supported do you feel right now? We get a response that we can actually work with, because the difference between a 4 and an 8 tells us much more than I'm fine, which is generally the response we get. And we end that conversation with both of us walking away feeling very different. Because as a reminder, the last 10, 15, 20 seconds of a conversation really leads to a major impact, because that's how we leave feeling. And the real value here, by the way, isn't just the number, but the question that comes next. This is one of the simplest but most powerful questions you can ask as a leader. So first step, 1 to 10. And by the way, you do need to set what 1 is and what 10 is. So when I say on a scale of 1 to 10, like I did with all of you at the beginning of this, I said on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being these questions make you not feel good. You may be anxious, maybe reactive. 10 is you feel confident and comfortable going into this conversation. You need to do the same thing with anyone that you're talking about. So when you're asking someone on a scale of 1 to 10, how prepared do you feel right now? You do need to say 1 being not prepared at all, and 10 being incredibly prepared, confident, and ready to go. Once you've established your 1 to 10 and what that looks like, then you do this. And I'm telling you, and I know you're all going to be like, Emily, this is backwards, because that's what it sounds like, because I'm going to say, what makes it a 6 instead of a 5? So I asked someone on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel as we're making this change within our company? 1 being you don't feel ready for this change at all, and 10 being you feel pretty confident about where we're going, what's happening, and what the next steps are. And if this person responds to me and says, I feel like I'm at a 6. I need to say, what makes it a 6 instead of a 5? We're used to asking, why isn't this number higher, right? Why aren't you a 10? Why are you a 6? What's missing? What's wrong? Why are you a 6? What's happening here? But this question does something different because instead of focusing on what's lacking, it starts by assuming there is already something working. We are already being successful because we aren't at a 5 or a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or a 1, but we're not looking for big major changes here. We want to stick to the closest number to this. What makes it a 6 instead of a 5? Because instead of focusing on what's lacking, we're able to hear what's going well. If someone says, by the way, they're a 5 out of 10, that's not nothing. That's actually a pretty good space. If they say they're a 6, if they say they're a 2, if they say they're a -1, we're learning, right? That means, though, here in this situation, there is already some level of confidence, motivation, or progress. And when we ask why not a 10, people begin to explain the problems. But when we do this, people start to recognize the strengths they weren't even naming. I've heard things before about like, I feel more ready for this change and I'm a 6 instead of a 5 because you have explained what the next steps are going to look like. I'm just still fearful. I've heard things of people saying, I am a 6 instead of a 5 because I've gone through changes before in other companies where I've worked, and I know that they work out well. And I know that it's probably going to be okay, but I struggle with anxiety when it comes to changes. And so I'm not quite higher than that, but I also am confident that it'll be fine. Or I trust you as a leader, right? Like all of these incredible things come out. Again, sticking one number apart, not going further. And then once you get to that, providing some reflections, learning more, understanding, being empathetic as they're talking, continuing to have conversations around this response. This is not an ask this question and then immediately ask the next one I'm going to show you. This is utilize the information you gain from asking what makes it a 6 instead of a 5 and diving deeper into that. And then when you are ready, asking, what would make it a 7? Now we're uncovering barriers, strengths, motivations, solutions without telling anything, by the way, to the other person. Because if we had just asked and their response was, I'm fine, this wouldn't have gotten us as far as where we are right now. Because once someone gives you a number, whether it's a 4, a 6, or a 7, this is the natural next step. Not why isn't it higher, not what's wrong, but what would move it forward. The question is powerful because it shifts the conversation from evaluation to imagination. We're not analyzing why someone is stuck. We're helping them picture what progress actually looks like. Most people can't immediately solve a big problem, but they can usually describe what a small step forward would look like. And that's why we go from the 6 to the 7 as opposed from what would make it a 10, because that's a lot harder to imagine and that's a lot more steps to go through. You can utilize this and come back if you do weekly check-ins with people, again, with family that you see on a regular basis. Maybe your kid has a huge test coming up and you say to them, hey, buddy, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling about that math exam next week? And they say, I'm at a 3. Like, okay. Because again, you gave the examples, 1 being not ready at all, 10 being ready to rock it, absolutely confident. And they say 3, and you say, why are you a 3 and not a 2? They say, because I've been paying attention in class and I've been working really hard. And you talk about that and what that looks like. And you thank them for working hard in class and you congratulate them on being a good student. And you go through that conversation. And then you say, what would make it a 4? And they talk maybe about sitting down and helping study. Maybe they need some support, but they didn't know how to ask for it. Maybe they themselves want to go to a study group that exists. Maybe they need to ask a question to their teacher, right? And the next day you can come back and say, hey, buddy, Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not great at all, 10 feeling super awesome. How are you feeling about that math exam? And maybe they've moved, maybe they haven't, but you're giving that opportunity for those small moments of growth that are so important. It's hard to go from a 3 to a 10. It's pretty easy to identify how to move from a 3 to a 4. And one of the most important things throughout this is listening for feeling, not just the facts, because most of us listen for information. Great leaders listen for meaning. When someone is talking to us, they're giving us two messages at the same time. There's the content of what they're saying, the facts, and then there's the experience behind what they're saying, the feeling. Most leaders hear the facts, the best leaders listen for both. As leaders, we're often trained to listen for the information, for the facts. What's the deadline? What's the solution? What's the next step? But people are rarely coming to us with just facts. They're also bringing emotions, concerns, frustrations, excitements, uncertainty, and hopes. And here's the challenge. When we only respond to the facts, people often feel like we missed the point, even though they weren't saying it out loud. If an employee says, I've got 3 projects due this week and 2 people are out, I'm not sure where to start. We hear 3 projects, 2 people out. Okay, let's prioritize project A. Done, answered. But we skipped over the fact that that employee might be feeling overwhelmed, stressed, unsupported, and probably pretty anxious. Because before people are ready to move into problem solving, they often need to know that we understand what they're experiencing. Not because we're therapists, not because we're trying to fix their feelings, but because understanding builds trust. Think about the leaders you admired most, right? Those characteristics we talked about at the beginning. Did they always have the answer? Probably not. In fact, I think about conversations with my favorite leaders, my mentors, and they didn't always have the conversations that led to the right answers, but they always made me feel heard, respected, trusted. And that was what truly led to really quality growth within myself as a leader, as an employer, as a person in this world. And I think that we all have the capability to do that too. It's hard though, right? I'm definitely going to put that out there. This is something that you have to practice if you aren't naturally skilled in this area, and that's okay. And it means you have to slow down a little bit because if we only respond to the words, we may solve the task. But if we understand the experience, we truly strengthen the relationship. And one of the simplest ways to do that is through reflection. Okay, so we have some open ended questions, we have some reflection, we have 1 to 10. But reflection isn't always repeating what someone said, it's helping them know that you understand what they're experiencing. It sounds like, it seems like, I'm hearing, it feels like. These are all great phrases to just start enveloping in your day-to-day conversations when you're talking to someone because it's us saying, I see you, I hear you, and I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. And we're going to practice this together. We'll go through the first 2 to gain an understanding about what we're doing, and then I'm going to ask everyone to drop some ideas in the chat. So I've got 3 projects due this week. We hear that. Again, fact mine, week projects. Okay, I have a timeline and I have a what needs to happen. What this person is saying, they're probably overwhelmed. Next one, never done this before. Okay, my natural mind is here's the policies and processes. Here you go. Run with this. Here's the directions. Talk to an AI, have them help you get through it. Let's go. Done. But in reality, what they're probably saying is they have a lot of uncertainty, and we might need to pause and talk about that. So, first one sentence, identified overwhelm. Second one sentence, identified uncertainty. Third one, I wasn't included in that meeting. Drop in the chat if you have an idea of what you think that person is experiencing or what their feelings are related to I wasn't included in that meeting. Frustrated, Isolation. Don't know how we got to this point. Confusion, hurt, left out, angry, insecure, not respected, left out, unaware of what is going on. My gosh, you guys are good at this already. Lack of control. Amazing. Absolutely. All of those things. I selected exclusion because we all know what that feels like, right? Being excluded feels like you're not respected. It makes you angry. It makes you feel frustrated. All of those were spot on. I'm sure this is going to work. What do we think that person is feeling? Oh, I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm so sorry. I left a word out in my slide. I was like, that doesn't feel right. I'm not sure this is going to work. Just pretend it's in there. Doubtful, unsure. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? I'm not sure this is going to work. Not supported. Yes. That they might doubt us. Doubt. Absolutely. The word I selected for this one, concern. Because I'm concerned that this is not going to work. I'm doubting that this might not happen. I'm not feeling supported. And I feel like if I'm the one responsible for this, that a lot of that is going to fall on me. Last one. We'll see if I got all my words in here. I've revised this 3 times. What do we think people feel with that? If you're talking to someone and they frustration, yes, everyone is saying frustration. What? How'd you know? Absolutely. All of these things have facts in them, but they also have feelings, right? Like those are incredibly important opportunities for us to listen deeper and to understand what people are truly saying. The leadership conversation that we have, if we bring this all together, this is what it looks like in practice. Open with warmth and curiosity. Hi, hello, even how's it going can be really beneficial, taking that extra time. Listen for those feelings, not just facts. Use simple discovery tools. If you don't like the power of 1 to 10, absolutely fine. Find something that works for you, though, because the ability to get a true and real answer from someone can be so impactful versus I'm fine. Honestly, I saw someone earlier put in the chat that that is great for parenting, and I would guarantee that it works incredibly well, especially for those teenagers that don't like to talk very much. And you ask how school was and you get the I'm fine, great opportunity. Same for the employees who are quieter. Same for your friends who maybe are going through a really tough time right now. Saying, hey, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to find a solution? But also looking at the power of 1 to 10 to figure out where they really are. Yes, thank you, Kayla. Fine. Feelings inside, not expressed. Absolutely. I love that. Reflect what you hear so they understand that you are trying to be where they are, that you have that empathy and understanding of what's going on, and summarize and create clarity. End conversations with questions that lead to plans on who is taking the next step and what's happening. And give those opportunities a lot of the times to the other people that you're working with and around, because leadership is experienced in moments, not statements. And most importantly, and the thing that I hope everyone leaves with today is that conversations shape legacy, because legacy in motion isn't built through perfection. It's built through consistency and the small moments and the quiet conversations and how we make people feel when we're in front of them and when we're not in front of them. All of these different skills that I have just gone through are opportunities that you can take. If you leave today with one simple thing that you want to move forward with in who you are as a leader, know that that's a really positive legacy that you're leaving. And because you're all here today and because you're on this call, I would guarantee that you're all already leaving a really positive legacy in those small moments, right? Because as I say, legacy is quiet moments. That's what leads to big impact. It's not always the people who have their name on a building. It's not the people who created a project and then left. It's not those who built the policies and processes that we all follow. It's how we felt around them, how they made us feel, how we make others feel, how we do that through conversations and communication. Are we building those characteristics that we really and truly wanted when we went through that in the beginning? Again, we are all going to slide onto both sides of that not great leadership characteristics and wonderful leaders characteristics because we are human and we all have days. But you guys are all here looking to do this. And I, again, would guarantee you're all building a really positive legacy. And I am so grateful that you joined us today. We have a few minutes for questions. I see Debbie jumping on to say hello and hi. Thank you, Debbie, for helping host this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And Debbie, if you have anything, feel free to talk now.
I I do. Thank you for help for doing half of what I wanted to say, which is great. It's great. So thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much. Um, I'm there are a couple of things here. First of all, there are three things that I took away that I hope everyone else did as well. I mean, I hope you took something away. Yes, like Emily said, please put your questions in the chat. We'll grab those really quick. I just launched a poll. There's only 4 questions. We really value your feedback. So if you could do that very quickly. The other thing that I'm going to do is there are other free webinars that we have available as well. I put that link in there. And then one more link that I want to put in, if I can find it with my gazillion screens going on. I'll find that as I talk. Emily, some of the things that I took away were like the whole experience thing. And as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, I can't remember half the stuff. And because the emotions are there as well, sometimes it's
Yeah.
like your brain goes, but the feelings stay, which is, I mean, you think back, so years you can think about how somebody made you feel. And that is so crucial with how we interact with others. The other ones, and I think it's like leaders they all don't have formal titles. Leaders
Yeah.
are anyone. I would say everyone on this call is a leader of some kind, whether it's to your children, to your peers, to your church, to whatever. So wonderful. And the other one is stay curious with everything.
Yeah.
It's not so
Yes.
much just
Always.
business, it's everything. So Heidi says a wonderful presentation, and thank you, Emily. And I agree, very informative. Thank you, Anne. I think great presentation. Any questions you want to put in there for Emily?
Yeah. Yeah, I personally, I started utilizing a lot of these skills early on in my career, and I just kind of came across them working in homeless services in the nonprofit world, and then, transitioning to starting my own business. And being able to utilize these comes in so many different areas and forms. But I think for each and every single one of us, it's about grabbing those little nuggets of information from these different trainings that Kirkwood Corporate Training is putting on, from other webinars, our opportunities that we have, and building what makes sense for you. Right. So I went through 50 minutes of information and maybe one or two things really resonated with you. That's a tool you can now have in your toolbox. I hope that you're able to find others throughout your leadership. And to Debbie's point, wherever you are a leader or whoever you know that is a leader, because we're not all going to become duplicates of each other, but we are going to be able to find the different things that really work for us, which is why I say if 1 to 10 doesn't feel like something that you're comfortable doing, find something that is, though, just a way to check in. Start learning more open-ended questions if that's something you haven't utilized before, right? These are opportunities for you to just decide, what type of leader do I want to be? What legacy do I want to leave behind? Do I want to be the person that people think of when someone else asks, hey, think of a really good leader you've had in the past and what characteristics they have? Or do you want to be the leader that they think of on the other side? So I hope everyone was able to take some nuggets away. Thank you, Michelle and Kayla, and everyone else who has dropped comments in the chat. Thank you, everyone who participated throughout that time of providing responses and those who are responding to Debbie's poll. Truly grateful for each and every one of you. And I look forward to seeing people in the future.
Thank you again. Everyone have a great day. And thank you again for joining us. Bye.
Bye.